Hi, folks. This is Dylan with Ray. Hopefully, one of you know at least one of us. We've been talking about doing a periodic webinar for a little while now, and this is our first in what hopefully will be a continuing and productive conversation. Ray has deep experience from the product side of things. He's one of the hippest of product developers and knows things that I've only dreamt of. And I come at it more from a much less glamorous side of the security and the compliance and the boring bits. I'm excited. Today, we wanted to talk about the supply chain and some of the recent changes in how products are built. If you have questions, please chat them in and we will try to get to them. Thanks very much. All right, Ray, where should we start?
Well, when you say the supply chain, right? Like I've watched enough of your community's materials to know why you say that, but this is one of those sort of cultural rifts where product developers and to some extent even site reliability engineers, such as I am now, don't speak in terms of a supply chain. And it does differ a little bit from like what a supply chain that carries physical goods is doing. So why don't you tell me,
Sure.
us all, like what that means to you? Why is that such a starting point for you? Because it is logical, but it's not something we talk about.
Beautiful. Okay. How about I start with a stereotype that people have, maybe security people have of the developer community. What I'm imagining is, developers today don't code it all themselves. They're not writing all their libraries. They're not just coding from start to finish like maybe your uncle doing Fortran 77 or COBOL did back in the day. Nah, they're using React. They're using some very fancy libraries. They're using drag and drop interfaces. And they're basically doing Legos with code. They got some fancy Legos and they're putting them together to make it look the way it should. How's that? Am I offensive yet to developers?
Only slightly, because we say this about each other all the time. And there's even like some sort of hierarchical gatekeeping that goes on in some level, just, infighting within developers of like, us and the game developers, we're writing, I'm not them, but like we're writing everything, almost from scratch for a game engine. And these people over here, they can't do anything without including 100 libraries. And there are kind of pros and cons. Like there are different constraints that those different areas have that make one or more or less viable. But I saw something along these lines from someone in gaming, actually, who's worked on the Odin language. Ginger Bill is his alias. You find him that way. He's got this C++ competitor called Odin he's working on. And people have said, well, Rust has such good dependency management. These other languages don't have good dependency management. And he says, that just makes it too easy for you to do the wrong thing. Like he doesn't even want to automate dependency management for his language because he wants you to have to feel the pain of bringing in extra code because you've got to actually physically copy and paste it into your code base. He doesn't want you to be doing that willy-nilly. So it's kind of a debate if we've gone too far in this Lego brick thing, but there are hazards on both sides of the equation. I will say this, as far as it being easier, I'm not sure that it's what we've created for ourselves is easier, because I think it was actually easier to start programming when I did in roughly 1990.
Mhm.
because you had, you couldn't do the same things as easily, but to get started was so much easier because
Sure.
you didn't have this ecosystem to wrestle with. You had, in my case, IBM PC Junior, a basic cartridge, the manual, which contains everything there is to know about this entire programming
Yeah.
environment, everything you could
And
ever
you
do is
used
right there.
GoTo your heart's content.
Not everything was great, but yeah,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
yeah. Um,
For those not hip to the jive, these days GoTo is considered harmful.
Yeah,
And
yeah. If in the past, 50 years or so, if you're not up on the developments of the
Mhm.
1970s, we've
Right, right.
decided to.
So I'm gonna run with this Lego analogy, and so
That's another thing
not
that game
only
programmers are dragging their feet on, by the way.
yeah, not only are you building with Legos, but you're reusing each other's Legos.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna build like my fancy little Lego spaceship that I built last Saturday, and it does something pretty well. It looks great. Little dude fits in there, whatever. And then someone else just grabs it and starts building on it without any regard to what's inside it.
Yeah.
And it's so easy. And you can, as long as it works, it doesn't much matter how you get to your end result. Whatever is inside is maybe less important because you got to build features fast. You're building, I don't know, something fancy, and you're just grabbing different parts from different places. You're copying and pasting from Stack Overflow, or you're just sucking in things from NPM or whatever you find, as long as it works. All right.
Yeah.
By now, I've probably offended everybody. So please walk me back, Ray.
Oh, I mean, that's, 100% happens, right? And there's a question of how to do it responsibly. Let me tell you a counterfactual, right? Let's say you have not invented here, right? Which is its own ANSI pattern. Because I think
Yes.
and you've seen people introduce security vulnerabilities that way as well, I'm sure. If let's suppose that I'm fresh off building a game engine, and now I've been transplanted into the web development world, and I'm like, I don't need to include a library for any, like, no one codes anymore. Come on, I'll just read the HTTP spec, and I'll just build my own HTTP server, which is like, that sounds hard, but actually, like, a serviceable one is not that hard. It's an undergraduate college exercise, to get one of the least functions. And so then I build something, implement whatever protocols are involved in communicating, and it, kind of works. It appears to work. And once again, I'm under production pressure, just like the ones that cause me to be lazy with libraries, is I maybe don't have a fully industrial strength implementation, but this appears to basically work. And, until it doesn't. And
Yes.
what we're weighing here is, might I be able to take in a battle-tested library that was going to implement HTTP and whatever other, standard functionality in a really community battle-tested way? And might that be like a lot better situation? And there are situations where it is and it's not.
Yes. Thank you. That is the perfect example. That is the perfect counterexample. I feel like I have seen things rewritten that should not be rewritten. I mean, linters are famous for it. Like, the good ones will call out, why'd you copy and paste this thing? You could have written this in as a function and done it once. Or why on earth are you doing it this way? There's a library for, I don't know, whatever. I'm starting to lose my area of expertise. You could probably fill in the blanks better than I can.
Yeah.
This is the supply chain. Think of like Boeing or something. They got a million suppliers that put together gaskets, and the people buy the gaskets, and aluminum, and they put together slightly larger subcomponents, and finally it all trees itself down to a saleable 747. But it's only as good as all this stuff you've sourced. And as Boeing has shown us in the last couple decades with the Dreamliner especially, if you outsource so much of your stuff to so many different suppliers, you're dependent on the stability of way more people, and way more. Each one is a single source of failure. And that can cause challenges when practically making the stuff at scale. And you don't, and worse, you may not know what all's inside from the very beginning. So when the security folks talk about the supply chain, they talk about that tendency of coders to encapsulate and package other software they found somewhere else in levels of abstraction, and you might not know what all's inside. But to your point, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I would rather everybody stop coding their own stupid encryption libraries. That'd be a happy day. Don't do it yourself. You're not as good at it as you think you are.
Yeah, and you probably should know a little bit about the parties you get it from as well, right? Like, and the third-party encryption libraries that you have any business using, yes, would be much better than your own implementation, but you probably want to know if they're under your trust. And there is a very big difference between including libraries with kind of reckless abandon and being somewhat judicious. Like, is this a load-bearing choice that I'm making? Is this something that is going to be likely to be future tech debt? And if you've been around the block, when you think about bringing in a library, you're doing that simulation in your head. Like, I will literally go and look at their activity and, okay, how long have they been around, and sort of do they have any apparent backing that might be likely to keep them around? Because what I don't want is, like, I'm binding to this library, and then in a year, like, the project gets orphaned. They just, no one's maintaining it, right? And so now I've not actually, because what I wanted was not someone that just had code that would work in the moment. I wanted something that was going to be cared for, that I wouldn't have.
And what you ended up with was a C wrapper around a COBOL routine with some regular expressions jammed on either side, and like some awk and some sed. And you poke it and it falls over. And everybody's sad. So this is the challenge. Like, there's failure on both sides. You don't want to overcode what's already been built, not only for saving your own time, but because you're going to probably screw it up, statistically speaking. I mean, you're awesome, but like, don't recode all the libraries. And then on the other hand, where'd that stuff come from that you're using? Is it load bearing? So what's the happy medium, Ray? And how would you know if you've gotten there?
Okay, so we're going to turn on sweeping generalization mode. Because obviously I mentioned these different areas, the needs are different. And so there are, gaming embedded systems where they notoriously very rarely use libraries. If they do, they're like copying it often directly into their repository, which is known as vendoring. Like, vendoring your deps, your dependencies, means you're just creating often a /vendor directory in your repo and just pasting everything in there. You're essentially creating a hard fork of everything. And that means, okay, you're not going to automatically get the updates. You're going to have, and you might be even customizing it, who knows? But also, you are not coupled to the supply chain. You just got all your supplies and you're building a wall now. You have neither the good nor bad things of those updates. So there are all these different ways but these are like workarounds. I see this as not really like answers to your question versus how do we deal with the consequences of how we've answered the question. On the other extreme, where we've got all the dependencies and transitive dependencies, I've seen starter projects that you just start a project from the template, and there's literally 1,000 libraries, little tiny, JavaScript things or whatever. And then you have other workarounds where you are using lots of analysis and automated things that help you do your upgrades and what have you. So you may imagine, okay, Goldilocks zone, right, is neither side of this. But I think that in most of the software engineering world, the ones you hear from, at least the most bloggiest of them all, which tends to be web development, has slid a little too far towards too many. And you would be maybe not, I don't say go to zero, but I say if you can't have like a handful of libraries that are really core to what you're doing and implement the rest themselves, like you should be asking yourself why. You should be asking yourself questions about this. I remember I was once at a well-known company that does vehicle history, which you may guess. And there was an acquirer actually that they were in talks with as part of some due diligence operation. It trickled down to the dev team. They're like, hey, we need to know every library that you're using and every license that they're under, because we were using a lot of open source tech, and we were deploying in a way that was totally fine with the licenses. But we were actually like flabbergasted, like that we were even being asked to provide a list of what's in the product and what license it was under. Like that was such an alien ask of us because we had no even notion of accountability of software supply chain, a software bill of materials, as it's sometimes called.
Right.
Like the idea that we would even be asked, even though we cared about curating this, but like that the business would want to know what's in the thing. That was very strange to us at that time.
What year was that?
Let me do some math. I'm going to say it was 2012-ish.
Yeah. Because, I mean, that is remarkably prescient, like, because what was it in 2017? The SolarWinds breach like got big, and the response from the US federal government was, all right, all vendors of software selling to the US federal government have to give a manifest of all the stuff inside and where it came from. And they attested, and that the software vendors attest to the adequacy and correctness of all of it. And for some code bases, like, man, that thing's 60 years old. Well, 40 years old. Who knows where it came from? And it caused this panic. Just like what you're describing. And this was in 2020, I think, that the executive order came out. And a lot of old companies were scared for the exact same reason you were, because they had no idea. They'd never kept those records. And I don't know. Yeah, where are we at with software bill of materials now, Ray? Is it commoditized now? Is it easy?
Oh boy, there are a lot of vendors that would like to tell you that it's easy, and it might be, I don't know, if you
Mhm.
I have never seen a situation. I've seen different degrees of difficulty, but like the world in which I think you and I would like to see, in which that's a completely trivial thing to be like,
Mhm.
hey, that that artifact we just deployed to production, you know, what's in it and where did it come from? Like
Yeah.
that should be like an almost instantaneous thing to be able to see in not only like a raw but a very digestible, understandable, navigable way.
Mhm.
Asks questions like, hey, there was a log4j vulnerability that affects
Well,
these
yes.
versions of log4j, you know, to take a not so hypothetical example. um, where are
Should we
we
explain should we
where are
explain
we with
Log4j?
Log4j is the most popular logging library for Java, though not particularly a modern one to pick nowadays. But um, so it's just supposed to be logging, you know, to your log files or wherever you like to put your logs, centralized logging maybe. Um, and a security vulnerability, inexplicably, a security vulnerability in the logging library, core to the Java ecosystem, you know, like a number two language in production, um, appears. And everyone who's got a log4j jar anywhere, whether or not they're a Java shop or not, they could be running Jenkins, they could be running any, you know, number of Java applications that have this. Everyone had to like scramble and find all the Java and upgrade this
Right.
log library a couple of years ago. And a lot going into why that happened. But what I'm zeroing in on is just answering the question, what needs to be updated. That part was hard for a lot of people.
Yeah. To use the Lego analogy, imagine a frantic team of Lego builders with some fantastically large Lego edifices scrambling to pull them apart to find out where a particular 10-year-old spaceship had been embedded by different builders in the past, over the past 20 years, 30 years. Because, I mean, how long has Log4j been in use? Since the 90s,
Decades
right?
at this point. Yeah, decades.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it had been encapsulated and built on, and then someone else built on that, and then someone built on that, and then someone built on that, and you had no idea. And so you had to go do like you had to look for its signs, almost like you were some kind of animal tracker, uh trying to find the elusive log4j. Like, where is it in this package? Lots of pain from not knowing where it ended up over 20 years.
Yeah, because the ability to track where this stuff come from didn't, like, that expectation didn't permeate most environments. So we have just lots of history of not having that, not expecting
Mhm.
that. It's not that it's on a technical level hard to do if you just, you know, built your situation with the assumption you'd need to do that. But if
Yeah,
you haven't, then it's very, very hard. Software supply chain is very, very hard if you don't design for it.
sure. I've heard of two solutions to this Goldilocks problem, and I want to run them by you, Ray, and you tell me the ways in which they are both pipe dreams for the security person and how it's not realistic at all. Are you ready?
Okay.
So strategy one, and I'm thinking um like executive vice duke of product engineering or something at some company. Okay. And they've got, I don't know, maybe 100 developers working for them. And so they want to deal with this problem at scale. How do I get a handle on my developers committing random nonsense libraries out of whatever?
Hmm?
All right. Technique one, they say no libraries, and they say everybody uses the same walled garden like .NET whatever version. .NET 7 or 8 or 9, whatever we're on this week.
Mhm.
Or we're going to write everything in Rust. We're going to write everything in Go. Walled garden approach. We're going to use, and maybe we need some libraries. So we're going to have a very heavy library vetting process. So we got like 4 libraries that you're allowed to use in addition to the ones that come out of the box.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's approach 1. Approach 2 is you've got some sort of library governance oversight committee, and any and a tool. So any libraries that are committed as part of like a pull request or something, even on dev, it needs to be on the list of the approved libraries or the approved versions of the libraries. And if it's not, your build breaks.
Mhm.
And then it's just a commit away from iterating that library version, and you can run all the standard regression tests, and you're trying to go for like fail fast, lots of little DevOpsy sort of changes. Did I explain the second one coherently?
Okay, so it sounds like the first one of the options was like a big bang rewrite in a single language, which is like that's a huge thing to talk about in and of itself. But then the rest of it was, it seemed like both of them involved some mandate of an approved library list. So how do the solutions differ? Other than that?
So first one is you're not managing libraries so much as everybody has the same building blocks to start. It's .NET Core 8 or it's whatever. Everybody's using React. The second option, and so you're relying on the vendor who created the SDK, the walled garden, to manage compatibility and like code breaking updates and stuff, and to stay on top of security issues. In the second one, you say, sure, we can use libraries, but you got to register them. You got to attest to their fitness, and we're going to try to like squeeze you into fewer maybe, and we're going to scan them for vulnerabilities, and we might update them independently.
Yeah. So for most situations that I've seen, people would hate both of those things. They have their upsides, but let me give you you asked for the pushback on these. So first of all, in the first scenario where it's sort of the no library, standard library only, and you mentioned something like .NET was like, okay, that's a pretty big set of standard library, but nonetheless, what you're asking for then is for people to do a lot of reinvention. And so you're going to be burning a lot of time for people to recreate what they need. And you could imagine, it's going to be just perfectly what built for us. It's going to meet our needs exactly. But it might also just be like they do just enough to like almost meet the needs of their team, and there's some other team that needs something kind of like that, and it's going to be a bad fit for them. Like you're inviting a lot of half-baked hasty solutions that you are now the sole maintainer of into your situation, and so I worry about that a lot. And in the second one, it's not quite as drastic as the first. And by the way, like in the middle there, the part about we're going to only use Rust. I mean, okay, what are you going to do with your million lines of Java and C#? Like, how do you get there? I mean, it might be nice to unify on a technology level, but usually you're talking about a big bang rewrite, which is the most notoriously doomed software project that exists, right? So then,
yeah, so many examples there. Yeah, keep going. What's wrong with option number 2? Why is that so painful?
Yeah, well, basically, I think you're giving some committee or somebody that my default assumption is they have really just low connection, low empathy with the dev teams that they're affecting. Control over, what my team's, the engineering standards of my team. We are trying to solve a particular problem. This group has no investment in whether we get that done. They're not incentivized the same way as us. So I don't trust that even if I interrupt my flow to go bug them, that I'm going to get anything useful out of them. I'm going to assume they're a department of saying no. And because they're always, their incentive is, we always want to keep the list small. We want to do, like they're going to want to do everything under the sun other than make my product owner happy. So I see control going away from my team. I see interruptions and a lack of agency, and just doesn't send a good message to me. Even though it's like at least there's some escape hatch, it's still just such a drastic move in order to make a relatively minor technical decision, is for what I'm used to.
Yeah. All right. So those are the 2 main approaches I've seen from the security side. And as you get into like kind of, you put in whatever you want, and then we have kind of scanners, people get nervous to scan like for bad stuff. The security folks, the governance folks get nervous because they do not have a lot of confidence in these general purpose suck scanners. And they have these long institutional memories of a log4j happening. And they'd like to get in front of a thing like that.
Yeah.
So that so they want to know where it's used in the first place. And maybe we shouldn't be using a 25-year-old library for logging in 200 million places. But how would they say no? How would they say, you might want to reconsider? What would that look like? How would that be how would that be done healthfully from your perspective?
Well, I would like to point out that if there were an approved libraries list, the most wizened, gray-bearded, stern governance council in existence would have still put Log4j right at the top of the approved library list. I could not imagine. I mean, not now, maybe, but without benefit of hindsight, I can't imagine a world where Log4j wouldn't be the most approviest of approved things. So I guess you could probably come up with a lot of other examples where this would maybe play out better for that solution. But I don't see it helping us there. I do see the lack of even understanding of where we have Log4j deployed or not, and what version. Like the lack of tracking inhibited our ability to respond to that. But the idea of a blessed library list probably wouldn't have helped us avoid it completely, just mitigate it. So what else can we do? So maybe you could convince me it's in my interest to use fewer libraries. Maybe you could actually use the engineering team's agency rather than taking agency away. Be giving them more agency, but incentivizing them to deliver a simpler product. So nothing that you've said has anything to do with like how I'm being incentivized, promoted, recognized, right? You've just said like there are some things I could do that would shut security team up. And like I gotta say, that's not floating to the top of my backlog. Until it happens. if I've got a promotion over here and making Dylan's team happy, who I see twice a year over here,
who are well-known whiners and say no, like Department of No is their alter label on my chat app.
Yeah, and I may be going into town halls, and I may be hearing C-level say, it's really important simplicity, and then, but the moment anyone said, we suggest like, well, this thing, by the way, the complexity, it hurts us the worst of anyone, right? Like, next to the users, it hurts us. So, but hey. We've got priorities there as well, some of which would probably, actually, I know this for a fact, I've done this. Like, we have initiatives that would make our lives easier, that would also make the security posture better. Because like the old cobwebs are often like ripe with these vulnerable libraries, right? These outdated things. So actually, one of my favorite uses of the dictates of the security team is to justify an overhaul that I want for some completely other reason. So I would say we by finding common interests.
Right. So I feel like this gets us very close to our advertised topic. What do we mean with no root cause? What is bring us home, right?
So, and I want to credit Lauren Hochstein, who a lot of people have said there's no root cause, but he actually made it his Twitter handle. So that was where I latched onto it. But basically, this is a phrase we tout in order to discourage the use of the term root cause in an incident analysis. And if you are interested in going deep, I really recommend something called Safety 2, safety-Roman numeral 2, which was something that came out of like aviation accident studies and lots of different fields. In terms of what the new style of incident analysis ought to look like. But basically, there's a pattern we're trying to get away from. Stop getting away from of finding one thing that we would now call a contributing factor or a trigger of an event, and saying that was the root cause, and that is the only thing we need to focus on. And this new point of view, among other things, says like that's not even a coherent way to talk about reality. The reason we point that out is because you're going to, by looking at more subtle causality, be able to find more opportunities to make your system safer. So notice that I didn't say like just, it wasn't the root cause was the developers didn't update their library. Well, what was behind that? Let's look at how they were incentivized. So there's always more causes behind the root cause, but also there's not even a single cause from, like, everything has multiple causes itself. So it's not even that in root cause analysis you're going why into a straight line back. It's a tree.
It's tree in both directions.
Yeah. So it's just a call to embrace the subtlety and certainly I would add, every time you're looking at something you're tempted to call a human error, a human error was almost always created by a confounding situation the human found themselves in. And you're more likely to fix the situation than to hope that the person doesn't make an error or that no one ever makes that error again.
Yeah. Let me say it back to you in like enterprise governance speak. We often look to simplify the world. It's a complicated place.
Yeah. And
when we do so, the power of just one answer is extremely compelling. That's so tempting.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be able to say, because it's a simple message to anybody, that's the reason. It's because he was too tired. It's because we didn't have the right artifact governance software. It's because and you see the news doing this, right? You know, when they show Delta's problematic, you know, flight outages or something, they don't list 5 reasons. They list antiquated IT systems, right? Like that's a single thing. And you're saying, do not go gentle into that dark night. Resist the urge.
Yeah. So let's, root cause, antiquated software systems. Okay. Well, how did that happen? Because, I mean, they became antiquated seemingly just through the inevitable passage of time. But it was obviously an option for us not to just let that happen. So what factors caused the company to deal with that well or poorly?
Right. And I think when phrased this way, this is a message that the security folks are going to get behind as well, because they know the complicatedness of reality. And they know how dang frustrating it is to explain that reality in very simple terms. You got 10 words, dude. You got to explain Log4j in 10 words to an executive who, I don't know, has no conception of the basic principles.
Yeah, that's and maybe even a haiku.
Yes. A koan.
So let me walk you through. Here's a koan, right? Let me try this one on for size to further hammer home the no root cause thing. So you'll often get like an interview question. Hey, what happens when you type something into Google or whatever? So let's pretend you're just sort of answering one of those riddles. What's approximately the sequence of events, embellish as much as you need, that occurs if you were to like type Ray Myers on LinkedIn and then pull up my profile in the search results? Like what is going on when you just like you type it in and then something happens behind the scenes? Roughly, what does that look like?
Are you asking me to tell you? Because I'd rather not.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's a bunch of JSON getting moved around and diddled in the process.
Yeah. And so, it may be unfair to ask you to improvise an architecture, but like, okay, well, I'm gonna enter it in the search box, right? And the client-side JavaScript is going to call, some REST service somewhere, perhaps, and it's going to call, a database, a search index, things like that. Log a bunch of stuff along the way, and that's then. And we're doing A, then B, then C. It's very linear. It's very Newtonian. It's very Cartesian. Very naive way of seeing the world, but it's a normal day, so we get away with that. And then it's going to ultimately receive that from the index and send it back, and my browser's gonna render it. There's a million other little steps that we're tiptoeing over, but now imagine that you type my name in and it didn't come back.
Okay. I can imagine this very easily. Yes.
Computers
have failed me before.
Okay. So now what could have happened?
There's bad juju in the tubes.
Sure.
Try it again.
Sure. And we could make up any number of causes that, it interfered somehow. But I thought that A caused B, caused C, caused D. So now, like, just any plausible analysis of why it didn't happen, it would have to involve, like, well, one of those didn't have some other condition that normally is true that isn't. Yeah. So really, you can only talk about things in the terms of single cause and single effect in a system that's operating according to plan. As soon as you're investigating a failure, the hidden assumptions are now, coming into play.
Yeah. So bring it back to developers and Legos and supply chains. How do you make this real? What's the practical lesson here?
Yeah. Well, if you heard the phrase, I burn the toast and you scrape it.
I have not, but I'm going to steal that. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, you lived it. You live this, and you are a renowned toast scraper. And I represent the delegation of toast burners, and I'm saying that we need to be finding ways of not burning the toast in the first place. And so DevSecOps, which is the security expansion pack to DevOps, is very much about this idea to some degree. We have this notion of shift left, but the ultimate shift left that's often occurred in that context is like at the point of where the pull requests are getting merged. Like, can we at least stop the pull requests from getting merged? That's a good start. Okay. But if we start to think bigger on shifting left, what keeps incentivizing us to create and then abandon brittle systems? So like I mentioned earlier, okay, so let's suppose I really believe in well, easy to manage, high quality, simple software. However, I have shutting up Dylan's team on one hand, and I have a promotion on the other. I cannot escape my incentives indefinitely, no matter what my personal values are. And I do think we need to get a better handle on professional responsibility, for sure, and having a little more backbone to push back on our incentives somehow. But you can't escape them in general. And so I think we need to get like all the way left to where we have more aligned goals. And SRE has tried to do this with SLOs in terms of like the product management, and developers, and then operations, like try to think in terms of these shared goals. It's that sort of direction you might look at with security. And I think we can do even better still, but unity of purpose is what I'm saying.
Sure. So I'm going to take what you said wildly out of context. And it sounds like you're saying that one of the most effective things to do to solve this problem long term is to identify and resolve conflicts in incentives between teams.
Yeah.
Is it wildly crazy?
Yeah, and especially if you, it's not crazy at all, especially if you think about conflicts kind of as broadly as I really want to talk here. My most recent video on Craft versus Cruft is actually called Core Conflicts and Reliability, Having Our Cake and Eating It. And I talk about some ideas that are from Theory of Constraints by Ellie Goldratt and others.
The famous one.
Yeah, The Evaporating Cloud. So that's the Goal was the famous book that kicked that off, but there's a lot more to it. And another of the pieces of it is called The Evaporating Cloud, which is a way of finding win-win solutions when there's a conflict, meaning to say there's we've been delegated different parts of making the business happy, and we believe our interests are in conflict with each other. But ultimately, we're all just trying to achieve high performance. And that means to us. There is, I dare to say, a general high performance, and it's not so contradictory either, right? Because it is possible to be working highly productively, very fast in a high quality, low security vulnerabilities, all that. You can have all of that at the same time. You just have to be careful about it and how you bring it about. So I would say, look, like, let's look for more win-wins is the short answer. And I
Oh,
guess I would say, imagine a world in which you saw a director say, "Oh, wasn't it great? They shipped that with on time with only 4 libraries." When was the last time you saw like a director of software and a director wasn't it amazing that they only used 4 libraries? I've never heard that called out. I've
and
never heard,
all of them have
I've
had
never heard any
updates in the last year.
tangible amounts of any tangible manifestations of simplicity actually get praised.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Okay, so unfortunately, we have replaced a core challenge of, oh, we got all these libraries and these Legos and who knows what's going on with all of them, with a probably harder question about how do you align incentives within your organization and like bubble up the needs of many perspectives into one unified direction.
Mm-hmm.
And books have probably been written about that one too. I don't feel like we have time to tackle that second one here today.
Yeah, but we're doing it right now. Like, this is where it's you just you talk to each other for one.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like I've now talked to a security expert in this webinar, like more amount of time just in this course of this webinar than in some entire tenures I had at a company. Like how much I interacted with their security experts the entire time I was there.
That's good. All right. So maybe here's a practical takeaway for all you executive vice dukes of software engineering and GRC or whatever. Send this webinar to your counterpart, to some of their direct reports, and say, what if we got together and had a unified vision of the future, and what is the easiest way we can get there? Because it's usually easier than you think it is. All right.
The first step can be easy.
The first step is always easy. The first step is always easy. You just do it, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it. All right. Enough platitudes for now. That was a lot of fun, Ray. We're going to keep doing this. I'm just super jazzed. So we're gonna talk about another topic. I have not decided what, you have not decided what, next week, or excuse me, next month, and in this space. For those listening or those listening afterwards, if you have something you want Ray and I to get salty about in this product security space, please let us know. We would love your collaboration too. Any from the live viewers, are any questions, any topics that we should sound off on before we close for the day? We give y'all 20 seconds.
Yeah. So where can people find you otherwise?
I'm very excited. Simple Salt is initiating a marketing machine. We're about creating a lot of accessible content to make security easy, to make it simple. You can find us at Simple Salt. We just spun up an Instagram page. My marketing team is assuring me that we'll also be on the ticks and the talks and the other things. And I don't even know what, because I'm a crusty old man. But if you can't find it, bother me and I will try to figure it out.
Yeah. And I have, I mentioned the YouTube channel, Craft versus Cruft. And I am Ray Myers on LinkedIn. Love to hear from you.
Yep. Yes. It's a great one. We've talked about a lot of Cruft just in the last hour. I imagine there's a lot of tie-ins.
Yeah, and there will be more. There will be Cruft.
Yes. People. All right. Have a wonderful day, folks. Thank you, Ray. Looking forward to chatting again.
Cheers.